Abusiafo ha Ghanatube from Dofo Snowy Masai so atena sibio me and nsem ahoduo a ekoso e with the four corners of Ghana bro enti manya age akonwa se de na abusiafo nse nsem no so makwakwapo abo ebi ano de bro enti entempa no ye ba kotie nsem ahoduo bi a ekoso wo man Ghana mu na yaba.
Recent military tensions in the Middle East, particularly the U.S. attacks on Iran, have triggered a rise in global crude oil prices, intensifying uncertainty in international energy markets. Now, for Ghana, a country heavily reliant on imported petroleum products, these developments pose significant challenges to fuel price stability and economic resilience. Now, despite recent appreciations of the cedi and temporary relief at the pumps, experts warn that sustained geopolitical shocks could reverse gains and strain Ghana's fuel supply and pricing mechanisms. Now, this morning's discussion will explore the multifaceted impact of the crisis on Ghana's energy sector and the government's response to safeguard consumers and the economy. And that's why I said that it's very good that we have Eduji in the building with us this morning, so we can better appreciate and understand what missiles flying between Iran and Israel really have to do with us here in Ghana. Let's take a look now at a compilation of what has transpired so far. Let's listen to leaders in the USA, leaders in Israel and in Iran as well, to put some more context to our discussion this morning.
Report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. And it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise.
We will give the same response to the United States as we have gave to Israel. We will respond strongly and we will stop aggression from any side, be it Israel or the United States. And we have given message to the United States that we will respond very firmly and will stop the aggression by anybody, including the United States. Nobody should expect Iran to show any kind of restraint.
And as you can see, geopolitical tensions rising indeed. Let me take you through a few slides again to put into some context what a sustained or prolonged war between these nations could mean for us here on home soil. We're looking at the price of Brent crude oil, and I mentioned that these tensions and attacks on Iran have triggered a rise in global crude oil. You take a look at how it has traveled from the start of the year, January 2025, all the way through up until June. And you're looking just below some $75 per barrel, some $75 per barrel. As of the time that this graph was put together, some $74, just a little over $74. That's the price that you would be looking at per barrel for Brent crude oil. This morning, our cursory checks indicate that that's further gone up. You're looking at about some $77 US. But how much do we really spend on importing oil every month? Let's take a look at that. Our bill every month for importing oil is some $400 million US. That's a hefty price indeed. That's how much money we are spending. So, of course, it's important for us to think about how we cushion ourselves in the coming weeks and months. Lawyer, did you let me come to you and find out what concrete measures that the NPA has put in place to ensure that we are getting uninterrupted fuel supply. You made mention of how much supply we have. Are you confident that that will cushion us as we see how this tension unfolds?
Okay, so I think let me say that from the president's point, there is a government committee chaired by the Chief of Staff that works on the issues of energy security, because it's of prime importance in terms of priority to government. That one, we have the needed stock of petroleum products. Two, the needed stock of what you say electricity in the country. So there's a whole committee that the president has put in place. Thankfully, my minister, who is hands-on, coordinates all these activities to ensure that the country's energy security is not compromised at any point whatsoever. Now, what we have done, obviously, at our end, is that thankfully we have enough stock currently in the country. It's not like on the sea or something. Currently, we have enough that, quote unquote, if we don't get any coming in, at least for 2 months, we can have the needed, what shall I say, fuel products to keep this country going. But it's also important to make the point that the bulk of our petroleum products is imported, the bulk. In Ghana today, we have thermal oil refinery that is supposed to do 45,000 barrels of crude daily. We also have Central refinery that is supposed to do additional 40 to 45,000 barrels of crude daily. We also have some smaller refineries that will do 4,500 barrels. These are quite small, you know. And however, these refineries are not, quote unquote, producing as expected. So there's a heavy reliance on products from abroad. Thankfully, our neighbor, Nigeria, through Dangote and others, also have products. And immediately, you cannot say that they are directly impacted, save the cost of what you call crude oil. You'll notice that crude oil prices today have moved from $60 to almost $74, $78. Now, the reason is really not because crude oil production had fallen. No. Almost all the major production ends are producing. So Saudi Arabia is still producing. The problem has come about largely because of what you call vessel availability. Now, you'd also notice that one of the major transport ends or hub when it comes to tanker movement and others, particularly from the Arabian Sea into the open sea, had to do with the Strait of Hormuz, which borders Oman, Iran, and some other countries, Kuwait and the rest. And you know, those are where they produce more of the natural gas, more of black gold, among other things. And so once you have that place almost becoming a theater of military prowess, who is mighty and who is not, it will impact on who and what vessels are willing to move products on that corridor. And so now the bigger problem is the issue of vessel availability and also the insurance that you need to pay, because once there are potential for anything military-wise, persons who transport these products are much concerned. And so you are likely to pay higher insurance premium even to get your product moved within because of the risk associated. And so the real cause in terms of the increase in the price is really not what I'll say lack of production, but the process of moving the product. So the freight cost is really what is raising the price from $60 to $74. That's really where the problem is coming.
So that is you say the risks that would be involved if you were transporting via the Strait of Hormuz. That's what will put an extra premium on your insurance and drive the cost up.
Because one of the border country is Iran.
Okay.
And then Oman, Kuwait, and the rest on that stretch. And so once you have that imminent danger, you want to underwrite the risk. And so you pay higher premium for it. And so that is really where the problem is coming from, and not necessarily a cut in production. Now, unlike countries like Russia and others that produces more, Saudi Arabia and co, they are not really the center or the epicenter of the conflict. It is Iran. And because of the movement and vessel availability among others, that is really where the impact is coming from. But you cannot also discount the fact that the conflict in and of itself will have an impact on the pricing. But if you look at it globally, the greater impact is coming from the cost of freight, of moving product within. And you know, the interesting part is that it's the shortest route into the OPC. So most shipping lines prefer using that route, which is cheaper and shorter, because the shorter the distance, the lower the cost. And so if you have to divert into other ends to get to the markets in Europe and the Asian countries and others, it will cost you more. Because a journey that can, say, take a week, if it's going to be 2 weeks, it will cost you more. And those people are not for that Christmas. They'll put the price, the cost that they are incurring onto the price of the product. And so basically, now what we are hoping for, and at this point, I want to activate my belief in the sense that, you see, China, Russia are critical allies of Iran. China depends a lot on its crude consumption on Iran. Russia obviously does its own thing, but it's a key ally of the Iranian current regime. I've already read in the news interventions from Putin, the Chinese leaders, among others, to keep that particular place open up for further transport. My hope is that at least in the next 2 weeks, we'll have a better and deeper appreciation of the actual impacts of what the issues are. The immediate fear is the threat of closure of the strait. The immediate threat to close it.
In fact, the impression is that that is, pending. That's the next step that we're going to see from Iran.
So if you look at how, in terms of the what we call the geology of the place, more or less, is Iran and Oman. So Iran cannot take a unilateral decision that we are completely closing that end.
All right, and you can take a look on your screens to better visualize what it is that we're talking about. The countries in question there. You see where Iran is. If we can make it a bit smaller, you'll get a better appreciation of what we're referring to, the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, but do carry on.
So thanks for the picture. But you see, you'll notice that Oman is on one side, Iran is on the other side. So Oman will not permit, because you see, once they use that, it is income to those countries, because the ships and others pay for the use of that end. And so what is going to happen is that Oman is not going to allow for a unilateral decision to just close that end completely. Again, like I pointed out, the Chinese have a lot of interest in terms of movements of goods and other services or movements of goods, more or less, to the Chinese and other South Asian countries. And so they also have an interest to ensure that the passage is not closed. And so there are a lot of interests involved, and more importantly, the Europeans as well, because then, beyond crude, it's easier for you to move liquefied natural gas and others into Europe to power households and others around that corridor. So completely having it closed will be quite an interesting. On the Saturday evening, there was an emergency UN Security Council meeting.
That's right.
I observed it because, I've become my mind is on these matters in recent time, just to ensure that I have a further. And from the UN Security Council meeting, it does appear that there's a greater call for diplomatic intervention than a full-blown, full-scale war within the region. Thankfully, Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and co within the region appears to have adopted a strategy for less military intervention. Now the danger is if the whole Gulf end is engulfed in war, then production itself will be affected. Now if production itself is affected, that is when the problem becomes like in terms of impact, will become much more serious. So at this point, all we can pray for is the key leaders within the region to come together to de-escalate the current conflict and more or less find a more diplomatic solution to it. And I'm very confident that this one, there's a higher possibility of it coming closer or down than what we are seeing, say, like Russia, Ukraine.
Okay, you see that there is some efforts at possible de-escalation.
Yeah, because of the interest. You see, Russia, Ukraine, the narrative is a bit more different.
Right.
But when you compare US, Israel, and Iran, so far, it's only these three. But Russia, China, and others have a greater interest in not having this whole thing become a full-blown conflict, war. And so we are very confident, and like the president pointed out earlier in his statement, the government itself is monitoring. But thankfully, one of the things that we're also doing is that government itself, through the Minister of Finance, is working on the stability of the city.
Because that's very vital.
Very vital. Because in Ghana, there are two principal determinants of commodity price. Petroleum pricing. The FOB pricing and the exchange rate. So usually what you want to do is to find out the impact of each one of them. The FOB had to do with all the things that we've talked about. Then the exchange rate, our finance ministers, Bank of Ghana and others. So far, the city had maintained a certain relative stability. If we're able to maintain it to the end of the year, and usually for the exchange rate, from August, September, business people begin to order for product for Christmas and others.
That's right.
And so you want a situation where if we're able to scale that period, we are good to go. Because that is usually the time when the orders are placed. That is usually when the demand for dollars goes up. And basically, if you look at the economics of demand and supply, you will see where the impact is coming from. So we are very confident that to the end of the year, the city will be relatively stable. We will maintain the 10.5, 10.3 throughout the year, and we'll be good to go.
Certainly. ADG, thank you so much for that foundation.
Ghanatube, so hit me at the comment section for commenting na ebre na minjebre enkinkai enfama answer na mesere musimikai will say Ghanatube, so one subscribe ya mema free subscribe na face me notification bell no for quick updates ebusia for sisi ade makram.